Hi, guys. Just a couple notes on Act 4 of Romeo and Juliet. As you can see from the screen, I visited our classroom last week. So you can see me in some pictures visiting it. It definitely was not the same without all of you there. But it brought back some really great memories of the year. And I definitely miss you guys. So Act 4, just a couple things. So this act really focuses so much more on Juliet than when you think about how it started. We were introduced to Romeo first, and he and his friends going to the party, but really with him in Mantua, um, banished from Verona, Juliet is feeling desperate and isolated from her family. She really feels as if her loyalty is not to the family that she grew up with, but to her, newly wedded family being Romeo. So that emphasis on Juliet and the lack of Romeo in the act really emphasizes how Juliet feels like she has so little choices and people to turn to. So the act starts with scene one, and Paris and Friar Lawrence are talking, and we come upon a conversation that is already occurring between them, where Paris is saying that on Thursday, Paris and Juliet are going to get married. Now, I've said this before, but remember, Paris is just kind of collateral damage. There's nothing wrong with him. He's a nice guy. It's just like he got caught up in all of this. And he legitimately is very sweet to Juliet and thinks that this will make her feel better, after Tybalt's death. It will give everybody something good to focus on. So there's just so much he doesn't know about Juliet and the situation. When Juliet comes upon them, and then, Paris and Juliet are talking, um, Juliet is saying things that are true to how she feels, but Paris does not understand them as that. And this is similar to when she was talking to her mom, and highlights the miscommunication and, the secrets that are happening in this play between characters. And even more so, it's like she's speaking her own language that nobody really understands. And so, she says that her face doesn't belong to hers. And Paris takes that as like, oh, it belongs to God, or maybe it even belongs to me. But of course, she means that her face belongs to Romeo. And she's able to say that and be true to Romeo. But, because she's not explicitly saying, I love Romeo, Paris can take it how he wants. And he's not really understanding her, just like her mom didn't really understand her. You hear what you want. So, that's one of the reasons that Shakespeare does that. Now, as soon as Paris leaves and Juliet is alone with Friar Lawrence, it's like the dam is busted open and all of her emotions and desperation just comes out. Like when she's talking to Paris, she's keeping it together. And then as soon as she's alone with Friar Lawrence, who knows the situation, she just like lets it all out. And what comes out is just how desperate she feels. And she goes through this whole list of things that she's willing to do rather than marry Paris, and go against. I mean, she can't marry Paris because she's legally and, spiritually married to Romeo. They've had their like marriage night together. So, in that aspect too. And so she can't say vows to somebody else. She just can't. And so, Friar Lawrence is in this weird situation. And, he in this whole thing has gotten into more than he bargained for. He married them because he thought this would help the feud, and he, knows them both. And now this has spiraled out of control. And in one regard, Friar Lawrence could get into a lot of trouble because he secretly married these two young people, and some of what has happened, maybe you could say, wasn't necessarily his fault. I mean, he's not the only one to blame for sure, but this is a bad situation, and one that obviously he's never been in either. So he suggests to Juliet this potion because, as we saw earlier when we were first introduced to Friar Lawrence, he makes little homeopathic concoctions and different things. And remember, he had that long, well, relatively long soliloquy about how things can be used for different purposes. If you take this, plant one way, it could be a poison, but another way it could do this. And he has what I always refer to as like mega NyQuil. That's what it sounds like. That knocks you out for about 48 hours and slows down everything about you. So, if you were given a really basic medical examination, um, they would assume that you were dead. Um, and so, he says, like, this is really risky, but since you're willing to kill yourself, it seems like you'd be willing to take a big risk like this. And Juliet is like, I am all in. I will do this. And she returns back and talks to her dad and apologizes and is playing the game. And of course she doesn't mean what she's saying, that she is going to marry Paris and she's sorry. And Capulet wants a loyal daughter. He wants things the way that he wants them. So he doesn't probe like too far in, and he even moves the marriage up to the next day, which really builds the tension in the plot because now everything has to happen even faster. And so not only once Juliet takes that potion does that 48 hours, if it works correctly as planned, start, but remember they have to let Romeo know through a messenger that this whole plan is happening. He has no idea. So, that was really smart of Shakespeare to throw that in because it makes everything more tense. And now we're in a time crunch. Will Romeo get this in time? Will the potion work? Will Juliet take it? All of that stuff. So, she on page 155, she makes sure that she's alone, and she has to go through this process of summoning the courage. And it's strange to say that because she's drinking, she's making a really rash, impulsive decision and she's faking her own death. But to her in that moment, that's the brave thing that she's doing so she can be connected to her husband again. So, there's been so many moments where she was relying on these other people. And now here she feels that she has to rely on herself. And she goes through all of these concerns that she has about taking this potion. What if it doesn't work? What if Friar Lawrence is actually just trying to like take me out of the equation and kill me? But she thinks like, no, we wouldn't do that. She's going to have to be in this, mausoleum where the dead bodies of the Capulet family are. And what if she wakes up too soon? It's really, really a circumstance that she's never been in before, and it's scary. And so finally, she cheerses to Romeo and drinks it, be whatever happens. And she even puts a knife under her bed just in case the potion doesn't work and she has to kill herself in the morning. That's how desperate she is. Then we have this really quick scene 4 where they're like, everyone's getting ready for the wedding, Capulet, and that really builds this tension too, where like the wedding plans are happening. Little do they know, dramatic irony, that Juliet is about to fake her death, or if the potion doesn't work, kill herself. And they have no idea. Again, that lack of communication and like true understanding between the generations and different people, even within a family. Act 4, scene 5 is when Juliet's body is found, and first found by the nurse. And this reaction to her dead body on page 163, Capulet has this extended metaphor at the top of 163 where he personifies death as a groom who has come and married Juliet rather than Paris. And then on page 163, we have Lady Capulet, the nurse, Paris, and Capulet all have like the same number of lines, and there's all these capital O's. If you open up to 163 and you take a look at that page real quick, and those O's get across like woeful emotion. It's like very dramatic. Oh, like that's what they say. And if we were in class, I would have each of those um, characters be played by a different student, but I'd have you all talk at the same time, and it's like this huge cacophony of like sound, and they're all grieving, but like no one's really listening to each other, and it's very dramatic. And Friar Lawrence comes in and is like, hey, stop it, because he needs to get the ball rolling, and he knows that she's faking her death, and that like the takeaway here is like, if you guys really cared this much about Juliet when she was living, maybe this wouldn't have happened, is like his subtext there. And so he breaks in and he's like, all right, like she's in a better place now, which could be heaven or could be like almost close to being with Romeo. And on page 165, we get this like everything meant for the funeral everything meant for the wedding will now be used for the funeral. So this kind of like contrast in the day's expectations. The very last part of Act 5 is this little scene between Peter, the nurse's servant, and these musicians. And a lot of times in productions, it's cut because it's not like very necessary, but it offers a little bit of comedic relief to the scene, where we have like this servant trying to boss around other servants, and the groundlings would like it very much, and just kind of gives everybody a little bit of break from all this tragedy and tension that's been building. Whew, okay, so will Romeo get the information in time? Will the potion really work? So now we go into Act 5, which is really, really short. And I can't wait to see what happens to all our characters with you. All right, bye.